The rooftop was all glass and skyline when her voice cut through the music. "We don't need that seat. She's just tagging along." The hostess nodded and lifted the chair like it weighed nothing. Lily's hand tightened around mine. I didn't argue. I watched the empty space where a person should be and measured it the way I measure a budget line. Visible, deliberate, and zeroed out. Anger wasn't loud. It was clinical. They wanted me small, quiet, billable only when useful. Fine. I filed the moment where it belonged evidence. Have you ever been treated like you didn't belong, even by your own family? Share your story below. You are not alone. Dinner started like a performance, every line rehearsed. Vanessa lifted the wine list the way a queen holds a decree. "We'll do the chef's tasting menu," she told the waiter. 6 courses, champagne for the table, the veuve, the good one. She didn't look at me when she added, "Not everyone here needs the full experience." The words slid across the table like glass shards. Jason, the intern waiter, nodded, careful, polite. He placed a tall water glass in front of Lily. Just water. No lemon, no sparkle, no warmth. My daughter glanced at the twins, sipping their gold bubbles, and smiled anyway. She's good at pretending things don't hurt. I taught her that. Vanessa turned to our mother. "Haley and Madison are thinking pre-law and marketing. They've always been so ambitious." Mom smiled, pride radiating like a spotlight. "Of course they are. They take after you." I stayed silent. That's what I do best observe. It's a skill disguised as weakness. I remembered the mortgage I paid when Dad died, the tuition checks I signed without anyone asking how I could afford them, every favor labeled as family support, never repayment. I had been the silent investor, in their version of family always funding their stability. They thought my silence meant compliance. It wasn't. It was containment. Anger has a way of burning clean when you've trained it. I learned early that reaction gives them proof. Stillness gives you control. So I let Vanessa's laughter fill the air hollow and practiced and counted every insult the way I count profit and loss. Vanessa leaned back, sparkling flute in hand. "You don't talk much, Erica. You should relax. Tonight's special." "We're celebrating success." I smiled. Whose she blinked, unsure if she heard me right. Ours, of course. Her words floated above the table like perfume, expensive, artificial, disappearing fast. I looked at Lily's reflection in the glass wall beside me, her small frame next to their perfect postures. She didn't fidget. She didn't cry. She stared out at the city, her eyes steady. I wanted to tell her that invisibility isn't failure. Sometimes it's camouflage. Because silence, when you choose, it isn't surrender. It's strategy. That's what I've been doing all these years, learning the art of surviving without applause. Keeping my voice low while my work spoke louder. Letting them believe I was the spare chair at their table, when in truth, I'd been building my own room. Vanessa raised her glass, smiling for the camera in her head. "To family," she said. "To performance," I whispered. She didn't hear me, but Lily did. She reached under the table and squeezed my hand once, quick and sure. This time, I didn't let go. Vanessa's voice filled the air like champagne bubbles, loud and pointless. "I just hit 200,000 followers last week," she announced, eyes shining at her own reflection in the wine glass. "Brand, deals, collaborations, it's insane. 7 figures this quarter." Mom's hand rested proudly on Vanessa's wrist. "You've worked so hard, honey. You deserve it." I studied them. The twins nodded their smiles, identical practiced. Jason stood a few steps away, pen poised, watching the scene unfold. He knew who I was. He'd seen my name on the executive directory. But he did what good employees do. He followed orders and kept quiet. I almost envied him. Vanessa leaned toward me. "You must be exhausted working all those corporate hours." "I could never live like that. I'd rather have freedom." Freedom. She said it like a brand name, not a feeling. In my head, I dismantled her sentence the way I dismantle contracts. Every boast she made was a liability disguised as success. Luxury was her armor shiny enough to blind her to the cracks beneath. The truth in security has a sound. It's the nervous laugh. After every brag, the way her fingers fidgeted with her diamond bracelet, as if touching it proved it was real. She didn't crave admiration. She feared irrelevance. I'd spent years believing people like her were cruel because they could be. Now I know they're cruel because they're scared. Jason returned to refill the glasses. Vanessa stopped him mid-motion. Don't overfill hers, she said, pointing at me. She's driving. He hesitated, eyes flicking to me. I gave the smallest nod. He obeyed. I didn't mind. Her control was currency, but I no longer traded in that market. Mom smiled, oblivious. Your sister's doing so well, Erica. You must be proud. I met her gaze and smiled politely. I'm observant. Silence stretched soft and awkward. The skyline behind them glittered like a spreadsheet, rows of light columns of glass, every window a data point. I imagined running the analysis. Inputs my time, my silence, my money. Outputs their comfort, their illusion. The equation was clean, predictable, and very nearly balanced. I watched Vanessa laugh again, high and sharp, the kind of sound that covers panic. She loved control the way a drowning person loves air. Her empire wasn't built on strength. It was built on fear of fading out. People mistake power for volume. I've learned it's the quiet voice that holds the trigger. I took a slow sip of water, the only drink they'd let me have tonight, and let the truth settle like ice in the glass. Her entire kingdom was built on credit, financial, emotional, moral, and every loan eventually comes due. I smiled across the table. To Worth, I said softly. She laughed, unaware I wasn't toasting her. Inside, I was already calculating the interest. Lily leaned toward me and whispered, Mom, can I get something to eat? Her voice was careful, almost apologetic. The twins were halfway through their second course truffle risotto, and Vanessa's fork froze mid-air. She can eat later, she said, smiling at Jason, like the discussion was over. We don't need to complicate the order. I looked at my daughter, her cheeks flushed, eyes darting down to the tablecloth. I felt that old pulse of heat in my chest, the one I used to mistake for shame. It wasn't shame anymore. It was data. Actually, I said she'll have the tasting menu. And the wine pairing. Vanessa laughed lightly the way people do when they think they've misheard. She's 14, Erica. Don't be ridiculous. Then, sparkling juice. But she'll have the same meal as everyone else. On my account. The room shifted. Not loudly, just a collective inhale, like the air itself, realized something had changed. Jason's eyes flicked between us. Vanessa's smile faltered. You don't need to do that. This dinner is on me. I set my napkin down. No, it isn't. I caught sight of Daniel emerging from the kitchen. He saw me, paused, then approached, wiping his hands. Good evening, he said, professional tone steady. Daniel, I said, please meet my family. I gestured around the table. Vanessa, Mom, the twins. They're dining at our flagship property tonight. The silence cracked. Our... What? Vanessa asked. Our flagship, I repeated. Echelon Tower. The first of 3 locations in the group I manage. Daniel nodded, politely. Everything to your liking so far? Yes, I said, and my smile was thin, precise. Exceptional work, as always. Vanessa's fork hit the plate. Wait, you own this place? I do, I said. Well, technically the corporation does. I just run it. Mom's wine glass trembled. Erica, why didn't you tell us? Because you never asked, I said. You were too busy ordering for me. The nearby tables had gone quiet. The city lights behind the glass flickered across their faces, shock, confusion, the slow dawning of awareness. Vanessa opened her mouth, closed it again, then laughed. A brittle laugh. Wow. So this was what some power move. No, I said. It's just the truth, and truth doesn't need permission. I turned to Jason. Bring the child's full tasting menu, please. Make sure it's plated beautifully. He nodded relief, flickering in his eyes, and disappeared toward the kitchen. The twins stared at me like they were seeing a ghost. Lily looked stunned, then proud, then something softer, safe. I leaned back, folded my hands, and met Vanessa's stare head on. For the first time all evening she was silent. And silence, when it finally arrives on the right side of power, sounds a lot like music. The next half hour felt like watching a tower collapse in slow motion. Vanessa's laugh turned brittle, her words suddenly too bright, too fast. Of course I knew, Mom. I just didn't realize how involved Erica still was. Jason returned with the check presented on a silver tray, setting it by Vanessa's hand. She slid out her platinum card with the kind of confidence you only have when you believe the world owes you applause. I knew before she did. The way Jason hesitated, the flicker across his face, it was the moment right before a screen goes dark. He returned a minute later, voice low, almost kind. I'm sorry, ma'am. The payment didn't go through. The air froze? What Vanessa's laugh cracked. That's impossible. Try it again. He nodded. Did returned once more softer this time. It's been declined. The room, once buzzing, went still. I could feel the weight of every gaze pretending not to watch. Vanessa's voice rose a half step. There's plenty of credit on that card. It's a mistake. It's fine, I said, tone even. No need to make a scene. The company comped the meal for internal guests. She looked at me, confusion flickering into anger. You? What? I turned slightly toward Jason. Would you please finalize the paperwork for the new Echelon Scholarship Fund under the Collins family name? Beneficiary Lily Daniels. He nodded once and walked away, efficient, invisible again. Vanessa's jaw tightened. You can't just... I can, I said, still calm. It's company policy to honor contributions made by family members. Don't worry, the press release will sound flattering. Her mother's hand touched her arm. Erica, this isn't necessary. It's overdue. Vanessa's mouth opened closed. Her daughters looked at her like they were seeing a stranger, someone they'd been following without question. This dinner, I said, was meant to celebrate success. Now it will, just not the kind you expected. She whispered, You're humiliating me. No, I said quietly. I'm removing the costume. What's left is truth. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was a verdict. I reached for my water glass, took a slow sip, and set it down with care. Consider the balance settled. Then I turned to Lily. Ready, sweetheart? She nodded, eyes bright, half terrified, half amazed. Vanessa's voice broke behind us. Erica, please wait. I didn't. We walked toward the elevator, the sound of cutlery faint behind us, the scent of truffle and tension lingering in the air. The numbers above the doors glowed as they closed floor 4746, a descent, not a fall. Because sometimes victory isn't loud. Sometimes it's the quiet click of an elevator door sealing shut, carrying you away from people who mistook your silence for weakness. Mom caught up to me near the elevator lobby, her heels clicking fast. "Erica," she said breathless, "you didn't have to embarrass us like that." I turned. "Embarrass you? You sat there while your granddaughter was told she didn't deserve to eat." Her face tightened the same way it used to when she wanted to end a conversation without admitting fault. "You could have handled it privately." "That's what you always say," I told her. "Keep it quiet, keep it polite, pretend it doesn't hurt." Behind her, the doors to the dining room stayed open just long enough for me to see Vanessa still at the table, staring down at the declined card, the twins silent beside her. "Do you have any idea how this looks?" Mom whispered. "Yes," I said, honest. For a moment she said nothing. Then softly, "You've changed." "No," I said. I finally stopped shrinking. When I walked back into the dining room, the crowd had thinned. Jason was clearing plates. Lily's meal waited untouched beside a place setting that gleamed under the pendant light. The same chair they'd removed at the start of the evening was back polished, centered. I guided her toward it. "Sit," I told her. She hesitated. "But, Mom—" "Sit," I repeated, quieter. "This is your place." Jason smiled as he placed the first plate in front of her. "Chef sent his compliments," he said. The applause started softly, just a few diners at nearby tables, then more. Not loud, just steady, respectful. Mom stood by the door frozen. Vanessa finally rose, face pale, trembling. "You ruined me," she said. I met her eyes. No, Vanessa. I ended the illusion. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. I turned to Lily, who was already cutting into her steak cheeks, flushed eyes bright. I felt something unclench in me, the kind of release you don't notice until it's gone. For years, they'd told me, silence was weakness. That to belong, I had to make myself small. But tonight, the room was quiet, because I made it so. Power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just reclaims a chair. Lily looked up and smiled. "It's really good," she said. I smiled back. "I know." The rest of the night passed in soft hums. The city, the jazz, the quiet sound of people realizing they'd just witnessed something end and begin at the same time. It wasn't vengeance. It was a closing statement, a recalibration. And when the final plate was cleared, the only thing left between us was the truth clean, cold, and deserved. Later that night, the city hummed beneath the windows of my office. The lights of Echelon Tower reflected across the glass. My glass now. My name on the corner suite door. The skyline looked different when you'd earned the view. Lily sat across from me, her shoes kicked off, legs tucked under her on the couch. She was finishing the dessert Chef Daniel had sent up the same molten chocolate she'd been denied hours ago. "Mom," she said quietly, "were you scared?" "No," I told her, "just done." She nodded like she understood spoon, pausing midair. "Why did Aunt Vanessa say we didn't belong?" "Because people like that measure worth by noise," I said. "By who talks the loudest, who flashes the most. They confuse attention for respect." She frowned. "But you didn't say anything." "Exactly," I smiled. "Silence makes them nervous." I opened my journal. I've kept one for years, not for nostalgia, but for clarity. I began to write not for her, not for them, for anyone who's ever been told they're too quiet, too plain, too extra, or not enough. They taught me to shrink. I learned to observe. They measured love in status updates. I measured it in survival. They thought invisibility was failure. It was preparation. I looked at Lily. "Do you know what the trick is?" She shook her head. "You don't need to fight for their seat. You build your own. Then you invite the people who never needed proof you belonged. She smiled, soft and sleepy. You built this place. We built it, I corrected. Every long night, every time they told me to settle. Every time I said nothing, I was building something they couldn't see. Outside, the skyline blinked like a heartbeat, slow, steady, alive. I wrote one last line beneath the rest. Sometimes revenge isn't fire, it's architecture. Lily closed her eyes. Mom. Yeah. Can we go back there again? I laughed softly. Someday. But next time, you'll order first. She grinned. I closed the journal, set down my pen, and let the quiet settle around us. Not heavy, peaceful, earned. Because silence isn't the absence of power. It's what it sounds like when you finally own it. If you've ever been told you were too quiet or too small or too much of anything, remember this: your worth isn't up for debate. Don't fight for their approval. Build your own table. And when you do, make sure there's room for the people who never asked you to shrink,